the version. This game is actually a reboot of the Castlevania series. In my opinion, a much needed refreshment for the Castlevania franchise. We have on the cover Gabriel Belmont, which is the main star of this game. In this game, which is divided into chapters, you have 12 chapters. You have basically Gabriel looking for some sort of a mask that could bring back the dead because his wife was murdered by the evil across the land. But anyway, in my opinion, this is a great game. From day one, because I bought it ever since it came out, but I didn't have the time, to make a review or comment for you. I was never, or let's say, I never agreed with most of the reviews that were made by the journalistic community. For some reason, people nowadays, they want to compare everything with, or compare it to God of War. Each and every game has borrowed ideas from another game or previous games before it. Point in fact is, most of the games have copied the basic Mario mechanics. If we go back, let's say 20 years ago when the NES was, not 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when the NES was hot stuff, each and every game was a mechanical copy. Or, well, I say mechanical because, jump A, fire B, you get the drill. But anyway, let's go back to Castlevania. For me, this is a great game. It fits perfectly into what Castlevania is. Many people have been displeased with the fact that this is a stage by stage, so to speak, action adventure game, unlike the previous Metroidvanias. But let me tell you, to those of you who think that Castlevania is from Symphony of the Night onward, you are gravely mistaken, my friends. Castlevania goes back to 1986. Back then, when it was released in the Nintendo Entertainment System, I think it was 1986, 87, I can't remember right now. It was an action game, action adventure game. You would go stage by stage. At the end of each stage, you would have a boss fight, and then you would go into the castle at the end of the game. Let me tell you, to those of you who think Castlevania is Symphony of the Night onward, that the best entries in the Castlevania series have been stage by stage, non-stop button mashing action games, such as the first Castlevania, the excellent Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, and I say excellent because Castlevania 3 was a game that, for the time being and for the system limitations that was the NES 20 years ago, that did something amazing, something incredible. Castlevania 4, Super Castlevania 4, which actually took advantage of what the Super Nintendo could do at the time. Still a very good game, Super Castlevania 4. And Rondo of Blood, which is the prequel to Symphony of the Night, or Dracula X, as people call it. Nevertheless, this is a great game. I have no complaints about it. The story fits in perfectly. I believe that most of you by now that have already played this game know that this guy is the one who becomes Dracula in the future. We don't know how, we don't know when, but in the end, after you fight, after the credit, you see some cutscene with Zobek, who actually is Death. That explains the connection between Dracula and his confidant, as the French would say, Death. You see Death, who goes into a church and talks to the Prince of Darkness, who turns out to be Gabriel, who says, don't call me that, I am Dracul, or the devil. Basically, if you pay attention closely to the game, each and every detail points to this guy being Dracula. I mean, the bosses. The first Lord of the Shadow, which is the wolf man or the werewolf guy, you can see there the three main Dracula powers. The ability to shapeshift into animals or wolf, the bat power or vampire power, and the power over death, because he beats death before he actually fights the final boss, which is Satan himself. It was a very interesting story. I think the connection to Satan was it's a key element, because if Dracula is the Prince of Darkness, if he is the main badass, I mean, come on, that power came from somewhere, and the badass of the badass in the dark world is none other than Satan himself. But anyway, that's another story. I think that this game is great if you pay attention to each and every situation that develops in the game, the scrolls that you pick up. In fact, there is a pretty much interesting scroll that you pick up within the castle, the vampire castle, which is Castlevania, that says that the castle, long before the vampires arrived, the castle belonged to the Bernhardt family. As you might know, Bernhardt is the surname for the copycat or copy of Dracula that appeared in this game, Castlevania Lament of Innocence. The final boss was Walter Bernhardt, who was the master of the castle. By the way, this is a game that it is not a bad game in itself, but the story, nah, that won't cut it. And the game, I think it was a little bit slow. Not a bad game, but not as fast and action-filled as Castlevania Lords of Shadow. This is a game that you're not gonna get bored with this game. Anyway, let's go back. You find a scroll within the castle that tells you that before the vampires arrived, the castle belonged to the Bernhardt family. It says that the Bernhardt made a pact or a deal with some sort of devil or hellspawn, and that the hellspawn took possession of the castle. That's why the castle, nobody has been able to make a map out of the castle, because the castle keeps changing. It seems as if the castle is alive. That's a recurrent theme within previous Castlevania games, that the castle, each and every time that it reappeared into our plane of existence, it would change. So I really like that detail over there. Really like the big boss fights. I mean, everything's great. Everything ties perfectly into what Castlevania lore is. I would like to advise those of you who have not played this game, because it looks a lot according to what the so-called video game journalists, because nowadays we have people making reviews for video games, but some of them are not hardcore gamers. Some of them are not the people who used to give you fair and objective reviews, such as the guys who used to work for video gaming magazines back in the day. But anyway, I would encourage you, please play the game and then reach to your own conclusions. Don't bash it. Do not disregard the game because some sort of goofball reviewer says it's too much like, oh, God of War, or it doesn't live up to God of War, whatever. This is not God of War. This is Castlevania, which in turn was or is an older franchise and action game that God of War is. Let me now stop here and go for part 2.